the position of the attacker can be different. And often we're thinking about an attacker here. When the attacker's here, we call it a man-in-the-middle attack. Let me walk you through what that looks like. So Alice's computer contacts the internet, which then it routes something across to Bob's server. We'll have a talk on networking later, but hopefully everyone is with me thus far. We hope that the connection looks like this. In reality, it can look like that, in which the message goes from Alice's computer to Charlie's computer to Bob's server. This is happening to everyone in this room right now. We call it a router. Your traffic falls across many points on the internet, which means that Charlie can be really any computer on this route. Charlie can do things like they can view things, they can change things, they can add things, they can delete things, and these all target our main stuff, right? They target confidentiality, integrity, availability. Common Charlies on the internet are internet service providers, VPN network providers. Oh, I have opinions here. Wi-Fi providers, an attacker rerouting your connection, or simply an incompetent admin. I have seen cases where all of a company's network is routed to someone's house. Anyway, the point is there be dragons on the internet, and these sorts of attacks can and do happen. Also, they're not always bad. Just because they happen doesn't mean it's bad. We're going to see whether this example is now aged out. I wrote this example back in 2016, I think, and it may no longer be valid. But let's say you go to your favorite coffee shop and try to visit BBC News. You think this is going to pop up, you know? We'll see when I wrote the slides. Let's look at this. But actually, you get this. What has just happened? Someone just messed with my webpage. This isn't the BBC. You have just experienced a man-in-the-middle attack. I say this is aged out because on most of your computers, they now auto-detect this, and a little box pops up and says, would you like to log in? Back when I wrote this, this just popped up by magic. And if you weren't paying attention to the URL, you would think, this isn't the BBC. This is a benign, but it is a man-in-the-middle attack. And this is exactly what a man-in-the-middle attack looks like. You try to go and contact a third party, a router in the middle goes, you're not logged in, and gives you a different web page from what you asked for. Now, this attack isn't so bad because they are not lying. They're like, I'm Starbucks, I am not the BBC. And they have a reason for doing so. So they're not misrepresenting themselves, but they are still attacking your network connection. The way this works is that Alice contacts the router at the Starbucks coffee, which doesn't forward it on to BBC and instead sends this back. Once you do log in, you get sent through to BBC News. It is modifying your traffic. Again, we will get to this in networking, but the internet has a lot of stuff in it. If you try to actually visit anything on the internet, you'll discover that your connection kind of like goes around like a bowling ball, like a ping pong ball. It's just kind of heading around in all sorts of directions. Again, I wrote this out a little bit ago, but I was sitting, I think, on our campus, Waterloo, and I tried to reach tulipslab.org, and this is everything that I went through. Okay. Again, we will get to this in networking. My main point is that Charlie is not a point of fiction. Charlie is happening on every single connection you're ever doing on the internet. The question is simply whether or not that all of these servers are not compromised and are benign. And if they are not, you're sitting on a lot of stress. And these are most definitely not always benign. So Verizon is a major service provider in the US. Predominantly, it does both home network or home internet connections and phone. They were caught, and I will get into this attack much more depth later, but they were caught adding cookies to connections. So that means that you, on your nice developer browser, following the instructions you, of course, did in an activity earlier, went and concealed the cookies your website is sending. And then as it went across your internet service provider, they helpfully just added some cookies and then sent it on to the main network. Why? For advertising reasons. They would sell to advertisers demographic information associated with cookies. So this is a known family in this area, this is their income range, this is stuff like that. They would sell that as association. They were caught and this was not considered acceptable. Charlie exists in the middle. This is an old example. This is out of World War II. So during World War II, we wanted to, I used to live in the UK. I'm speaking as a UK citizen right now, that's why I keep saying we. During the UK, at the time, we really wanted to mess with the Germans. They were attacking us, and this wasn't a good thing for us. So someone came up with this brilliant idea. From Germany, can you really tell the difference between a local radio signal and a radio signal being broadcast from the UK? Well, if it's powerful enough, maybe not. So the UK forces started targeting radio stations in Germany and taking them down. And then they would target the radio stations and just duplicate the traffic on their own. So they would basically be taking a German radio station and replaying it over this tower based in the UK. And then every so often, at rare intervals, they would just insert a little bit of misinformation or drop something that was intended to kind of maybe sway public opinion one way or the other. This approach was so successful that by the end of World War II, German generals were relying on this radio station because it was the most reliable radio station to get news about what was going on in other parts of the country. And this was a phenomenal advantage to the British. Integrity. This is a straight up attack on integrity. Why is the US government so upset about TikTok?
Because it's controlled from what they see and, quite frankly, is a foreign adversary that has vested interest in skewing narrative against the.
Does any of you know how your feed is built? I've seen whole research projects on how feeds are built in Facebook and Instagram and everything else. How different is your feed construction from this radio? And if a foreign government wanted to say just insert an occasional post in there to sway public opinion or give misinformation, what's stopping them? Now you can have a lot of trust opinions, and I know we have a range of nationalities here. My point is simply, there is very little difference between Facebook, Instagram, and that radio station. Integrity of your data. Oh, I love this one. This is an on-device man-in-the-middle attack. Man-in-the-middle attacks do not need to happen over the internet. They can happen inside your computer. This was a case in which Lenovo computers manufactured, I don't remember if at this point in time they were manufactured by IBM anymore. IBM gave up their ability to manufacture Lenovo at some point. They literally came pre-installed with a piece of adware that would run a local man-in-the-middle attack on your websites, and then just swap out bits of the websites for ads. And they would run locally on the machine. Oh man, they got in trouble for this one. But it's a beautiful example it shows. Alright. Is everyone clear on the basic concept of what a man-in-the-middle attack is? And hopefully you're all feeling a lot less safe than you were about 10 minutes ago. Good. Now we'll talk about how we fixed all that and why some of the stuff I'm talking about is aging out. Cryptography. Okay, I'm going to be pedantic here for a moment because we are learning about this concept. Cryptography refers to the science and art of designing ciphers. We're about to learn how ciphers work. Cryptoanalysis is the science and art of breaking those ciphers. And cryptography is often shortened as crypto. It's a study of both. I don't really pull these apart, but they are actually different areas of research. All right, we're going to mostly talk about computer stuff, but let's roll back a long distance because we have been trying to protect messages for a very long long time. What you're about to get today is not a modern cryptography lecture. It is a history lesson. If you want a proper cryptography lecture, I highly recommend Gong's course, which I forget the number of, but she teaches actual correct cryptography. My goal is to get everyone out of this room in the state in which you have a basic understanding of cryptography. You understand why keys are just so important. And if you want to learn how to do the math of this stuff, go take another course. Sorry. we're a breadth course. Letter logs. Long ago, if you wanted to send a letter between two people and you didn't want anyone to mess with it in the middle, you did a very fancy version of not origami, but kind of like origami, where you folded it such that it was physically impossible to open this letter without breaking it. You can kind of see this in old TV shows where they take a big wax seal and they stamp it with their stamp, and you're like, the security on this is awful. But the goal here is less to protect it and more to determine whether or not confidentiality and integrity has been broken. This is just a neat article kind of talking about the shape and structure of all these different letter blocks. All right, this is the basis for everything you're going to be learning. Encryption is the process of encoding a message so the meaning is not obvious. We call this encoding or enciphering. Decryption is the opposite. It reverses the process of this transformation such that we get our encrypted message back in its original form, also called decode or decipher. More formally, to encrypt something, we get a ciphertext C, which is equivalent to the encryption function with a key and the plaintext. Key is plaintext. For decryption, we get the plaintext by using the decryption function on a key which may or may not be the same key, and a ciphertext. Okay, we're starting slow, but we're going to speed up. These are very important words: ciphertext, plaintext, encryption, decryption, and key. And I will keep using these. The way this works is that we take the plaintext, we feed it through the encryption algorithm. The encryption algorithm includes a key out in the side, and that gives us a ciphertext. To get it back, we read it in with maybe the same key, and we get the original plaintext. And this is how encryption works. We're going to start with something called substitution cipher. I'm just going to dive right in and then I will define this midway. This is something called a Caesar cipher. Caesar ciphers are really old. They're from Julius Caesar's time. They rely on the fact that most people can't read to start with. So your messenger can't even read. We're starting there. And then you want to be able to protect this against really basic level attacks for someone who can barely read. And the way you do this is by rotating the wheel. Back in my childhood, they used to give out these like cipher wheels in cereal boxes, but I think that may have phased out. The main idea here, though, is I think you start in the middle. Oh no, okay, you take your text on the outside, and then you look at what the letter is on the inside. And the key here is just the number of rotations. So here we have an overly simple Caesar cipher with a key of 3. So we just rotated this wheel 3 times. All right, everyone's still with me because I know you're about to. I've had so many problems with this. I have now put an example on this screen. Okay, so this is nice. This is cute. We can do this with wheels, but we're all computer scientists. What's actually happening here is, well, what we're doing is a little bit of math. We're taking every letter of the alphabet has a number. We go and we convert it into that number. So we say take crypto here. And we convert it into 3, 18, 25, 16, etc. Then we take our key, which is 3. We add them. Oh, that number is bigger than 26, and there are only 26 letters in the alphabet. So we mod it, and we get our ciphertext out the other side. And then we invert this, but this time we use subtraction in order. We're still all here. Good. I know this seems simple. I have something. Okay, so that is a simple Caesar cipher. So today, instead of doing think, pair, shares, we have a handout. After much confusion I have experienced.
Oh my god. Beautiful.
All right, I want everyone to go and use the Caesar cipher. This is the ciphertext. I have written this message. Okay, so you have two things here. So first off, if that slide was confusing, try this. What letter, if I take R and then I add 7, what letter do I get? And then down here's the Caesar cipher. I've used a shift of 7. This is my ciphertext. Try going backwards. Don't mind me. All right, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes and wander around. All right. What we are dealing with here is something called a monoalphabetic substitution. A monoalphabetic substitution is a situation where you have one letter of the alphabet and you're flipping it with another letter of the alphabet, 1 to 1. So if I have an A in whatever substitution method I'm using, and it's paired with C, I will always flip A with C, and to do it the other way, I always go the other way around. These are some of the most simple versions of this. The one I just showed you is the Caesar cipher, and as I mentioned, it's old. Some really, really basic ways to mess with the Caesar cipher to make it just a little bit harder. One example is to use a key. So Caesar cipher uses a key of just the number, a count. But what if we mess with the alphabet itself? So one really simple example of this is what if instead of, okay, my mouse is set, it's not going to do anything. What if I made a key of security, and then I just pulled those letters out of the alphabet? So now S is the first letter, and S does not appear in other locations. Okay? And then I did the exact same computation you just did, but now I use this alphabet instead of the original one. This allows me to use arbitrary keys. This is still really easy for a messenger being sent physically across space to remember. Oh, the password's wolf, the password's zebra. And then someone who can read can pull this apart and then decrypt it fairly easily. This is also a monoalphabetic substitution, and there are a bunch of these. The biggest problem with monoalphabetic substitutions is if you're good at math, and you're good at frequency analysis, you start realizing things like the letter E is the singular most common letter in the English alphabet. And if E is always mapped to the same letter, then I can start pulling this apart. Today and tomorrow, you're going to frequently run into this text. There's no good reason other than Margaret Atwood was mentioned on the CBC News on my way in the year I wrote these lectures. So we have this bit of text off of Margaret Atwood, the Canadian Encyclopedia, and I'm just going to be encrypting and decrypting this a lot. Here is the plain text I copied off of that. I did a Caesar cipher of 7, and this is the ciphertext. There's a couple things notable here. One, when I did this, I only did letters, so when it says 18 here, it still says 18 there. Here are the letter frequencies. Oh wow, unsurprisingly, E is the most common letter down here. And, oh look, it maps to L. Which in front of you should all be able to see that now because you've done the mapping. When you're looking at this sort of a cipher, for a modern person, this is kind of not that hard to get. You basically run a frequency analysis, you look at the most common letters, you figure those out, and then from that you start trying to figure out what the other ones are. Modern computers will tear through Caesar cipher or similar very, very fast. So, maybe we shouldn't be using a singular fixed alphabet. Is there any reason we're using an alphabet at all? Because the Caesar cipher, what are you doing? You're adding 3 each time, right? Just to move it forward 1. I kind of wish I had done this other example here. When you do this one, you actually can't add 3 because, or you can, but you have to set up a different alphabet order. This is what we call a one-time pad. This is the gold star of crypto even now. This is one of the few things we know of that will not die during the great massive computational bump that we're getting right now. I'm going to say some words. Quantum thinking. This is quantum proof. This is awesome. So the idea of the one-time pad is you share a key in advance, and you use the key to decrypt the letters the same way we did just now, right? You take the ciphertext, you get it from just taking P plus 50 mod 26. Each letter gets a number, blah, 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 blah. We just did this. But the trick here is that your key is now actually what you're adding. So you take your plaintext and you add the key itself. And the key itself must be longer than your plaintext. So in this case, crypto is my plaintext, and the key here, this is literally the key. Straight up. And then I add them together. Most of you are familiar with this from the movies. I don't know why I'm spacing on this movie's name. The whole point of the movie, though, was they kept swapping secret stuff around, and it turned out they were using a Bible. Classically, the way you do one-time encryption, if you don't care too much, is you pick a book both of you have, because books have a whole lot of letters in them, and you just start at the beginning, and you use the book words itself as your encryption key, because in one-time pads, you need a long key, because you need to continuously be adding your plaintext to the key. This is from the Crypto Museum. This is an example of what one-time pads actually look like. They literally printed books full of gobbledygook, just random letters. And then the person would encrypt them by just adding. Okay, I put this in last year because it was confusing everyone so badly, but
The student cipher the key is what word you put in front of the
keys are going to shift a lot in this class. Tracking what the key is something that will change. When I go back to the Caesar cipher, so in the Caesar cipher, the key is a number.
Yes.
It's just telling you how far to shift in the alphabet. If I go to this one, now the key is this first word, this security word.
So the number you shift by is the cryptographic constant?
In this one, the way I presented it is you shift it by 0. But there's nothing stopping you from, say, doing a word and a number. So you could do this one as security 4, for example, and then you use this different alphabet and you shift it by 4. This wasn't used much, if at all, but it's a conceptual piece I'm mostly adding. That's why it doesn't have a name. All the fancy ones have names. This is just an example of a mono-alphabetic. And then, when we kind of move back to where we are here. And in this one, the key itself is being added. I'm mostly giving this here as an example because I just got so many questions about adding letters in the past. All right. Why is this? Oh, go ahead.
But if the world is longer than it,
Then it doesn't work. You can't encrypt it. And if you try to duplicate the key, which is the most obvious thing, you lose it. You basically, the quantum resistance goes out the window. This only works if the key is longer than the ciphertext, and it is the biggest problem with this method. This is why we do not use this anywhere, really. Or, no, I shouldn't say that. We use this. Spies use this. Anyone who really, really, really needs to keep things secret uses this because it is proof against everything we know. Why is it proof against everything we know? Okay, I'm trying to remember which order I plan to do these things in, but we'll try it maybe this way. This thing has awesome plausible deniability. So how did I break the last one? The last one I broke with frequency analysis, didn't I? It's kind of like pulling a puzzle apart. I found E and A and I, and then I'm like, okay, if I've got those ones sorted out, now I can kind of start figuring out everything else. And I know the same letter is always the same, right? So Z will always map to, say, C. And so if I can figure out kind of the pattern for Z, I can start pulling this apart like a puzzle. How do I do that with this one-time pad? And let me show you a kind of example of this. I think that for this class, I may have done this in poor order. So this is a good example. So here we have our Margaret Atwood text. Here's our key. I've just in libsum upsum, which isn't actually a whatever. It's an irrelevant set of very long text. Then I get my ciphertext out of that, and I do a frequency analysis. What happened to my frequencies? This is no longer something where it's a monoalphabetic, because it's no longer the case that C will always map to the same letter. One letter may map to all sorts of letters. And if I go back to this, I'm not going to actually answer this. I'm going to put your handout up. Sorry, I can't really put both the handout and this up. All right, the next one on the handout. This one you may need to talk to your neighbor about. This is solvable. Number 3. This is using one-time pad. Which one is the correct test? Go talk to your neighbor about it. All right, so what I did here is I started with plain text. I started with a key. My key is shared, right? Using me and the other person I'm communicating with. So my key has me take C and add A and get D. Let's say I wanted to say that this actually said key. Okay, well then I just create a wrong key, S, that produces K. All possibilities are I could create a key that did this work off of yours. You have no way to ever know if you got it right. Because there's nothing linking it. Because the key is as long as the ciphertext. But that is really expensive, making keys long as the ciphertext. It's a massive problem, and this is why this isn't used. But this is why it's quantum secure as well, because you can try all possible combinations, and you can produce all possible outputs. There is no way to break. When we're dealing with early ciphertexts, our 2 massive problems are 1, sharing keys, and 2, frequency analysis. So you can either be sharing a super long key, like I just showed, or you have to battle with frequency analysis and try to mess that up. Okay, we're going slowly enough. I'm not going to get into this. I may just pull it out of the slide deck because it confuses people every single year. It's better for the master students. The main point is, what does a good key look like? And the answer is as random as possible, but what does that mean precisely? And that's what the slide's doing. I will pull it out of the slide deck. It will not be appearing on exam. So there are 2 common approaches here. One's something called stream cipher and one's called block cipher. We've been talking about stream ciphers. So a stream cipher, a letter comes in, and right then you can say, is this A? Is this B? You can translate it one letter at a time as it progresses. Keep in mind, a lot of these would have been sent over like telegrams or all sorts of methods. The other one's called a block cipher, and I'll show you what this looks like. But in a block cipher, I take a set of letters and I encrypt them as a unit. So we're going to start with one of the early veneers or early string ciphers that. Sorry, I think I wrote. Forget which year. This is long. 1553. So this was created in 1553, and it was not broken until 1863. These are still ancient. Your modern computer will chew through this like nothing. But this is a lot more complicated than a standard. This is more complicated than you would get from a standard Caesar cipher. So the idea here is that you take your plain text, and then you take your key and you just repeat your key. So you do what's kind of suggested a moment ago. With well, if I have too short of a key, let's just repeat it. That's we call that a veneer cipher. And then the idea is that you can then go and encrypt this way, and you kind of get a fake one-time pad. A modern computer will chew through this like nothing because of these repetitions. Because of the repetitions and the fact that you have kind of a small set, it is actually possible to still do a frequency analysis, especially on a large text. But it took them a couple hundred years to break it. This is a block cipher. A block cipher, we now encrypt things as a unit. On your handout, I have this exact example just written down. So if you want to try to work through what I'm saying on your handout, you can. I think it's the example. But put plain text in an n by m array. So my message here is attack at dawn. Attack at dawn. ATTACKATDAWN, right? Based on a little grade. And then I do transposition. Transposition means I move some stuff around. So I'm going to transpose the rows. I'm going to take rows 1, 2, and 3 and change their order to 3, 2, 1. Right? So now my last one, dawn, is at the top. Now I transpose the columns. So I take my columns 1, 2, 3, 4, and I transpose them to 4, 2, 1, 3. And now I have this ciphertext at the bottom. NAD WTKCAAT8. That looks like code nonsense. All right. I think in the handout it has you reversing this. All right. You see what I've done here? What happened to my frequency analysis? I didn't change the characters, so my frequency analysis is identical to the amount of actual text. It didn't go anywhere. I basically turned this into a game of Scrabble. Now, the idea here, and I kind of want to highlight this point, cryptography, excluding one-time pads, is a game of time. For most stuff I will show you, including the massive stuff we use now in modern times, it is simply a game of time. Now, the idea is that hopefully that game of time is centuries that it would take a supercomputer to break something. But most stuff can be reversed with enough effort. That's what this is doing. Keeping in mind, this is also a somewhat old cipher. This is intended to make it really hard to put all those letters back together. And similar to a hash, we want to make the person who gets the cipher be able to do it fast, and the person who gets the cipher stolen not to be able to do it fast. So the key here is this ordering and transposition. So it'd be this mapping, the 1, 2, 3 to 3, 2, 1, and this one. And so then to break it, someone just undo. All right. So people understand block ciphers. Okay. There's a couple obvious problems. I'll get back to block ciphers and their confusion. But these are very simple things. By the way, these two methods, the substitution ciphers and the block ciphers, this is what modern crypto is sitting on top of. They do it at much bigger scale. They do it at all sorts of things. But when I start talking about like AES and DES, which are used frequently, there are a huge mix of these two things. This is predominant sections that are being used. So now we're going to hit the Playfair cipher. So up till now, we haven't really talked about kind of shifting what the letters are. E is mapped to something consistently, or it doesn't even change. Playfair said to himself, let's pull the data on this one, because it's also quite old. Oh, I didn't write it. That's unhelpful. All right, I'll have to look it up later. This is also old. This is like 1800s, roughly. This is a cryptographer who said to himself, can I teach a random kid on the street to decrypt something? I want something that's much harder to do than a veneer cipher, but I need an average, 6-year-old to be able to decrypt it. What could I do because we've got a lot of those around, and they were dealing with they're always dealing with a lot of concerns here. So they created something called the Playfair cipher. The Playfair cipher uses a key to create a grid of letters. We get rid of J just because it's annoying, and then we can't have a 5x5 grid if we have 26 letters. So they just lose J. You have to delete all the J's. And then you go and use this grid of letters. So we have a grid here. This grid is using something similar to what I presented earlier, where you have a key, which is just a word. In this case, the word is Playfair. This is similar to what I showed you earlier. So you remember this little thing where we pull the letter security to the front? We're doing the same thing. We pull the words Playfair to the front. So Playfair here, and then we don't have A anymore. Oh, no, sorry. I was using Playfair example. That's right. I was trying to. The words is Playfair and example. So, but the thing is that a couple letters appear here twice. Like A appears and then A appears. So it starts Playf where the A goes. It's already been used. So when you put it in, you might have repeated letters that don't appear later because you're just doing the full alphabet, excluding J. And you create this grid. And then you convert the message using pairs of letters, where an X is inserted between pairs of repeated letters. So a block is a pair of characters. So here it is, for example. Okay, this takes a bit of explosion. So let's say we have the message "Hello World." We're all used to this. So I now have to break up this message into pairs. If there's two L's, then it becomes LX and then LO. World, and then I think we just throw an X at the end if it doesn't come to the correct number. And all J's become I's. And then I follow these rules. So what I do is I take each letter that I want to do. So where does ciphertext go? Oh, here's our plaintext. So here's our plaintext. There was our grid. So here, what we see here is HE. So our first two letters here are HE. So I find H and E on our grid, and then that forms a little box. And then I use my rules to decide what I'm going to do. So square. So the first one is the rectangle one. So I pick from the same row but an opposite column. So if they form a box, then I just do this. Same row but opposite column. So MD, I think. DM, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so H was first. So DM. This is also being done by hand by my children. If it's a column, then we wrap. If it's a row, you pick the letters from right, wrapping if necessary. So now I have this plain text. I have my ciphertext. And it kind of messes with my frequency analysis, though not as much as you think, actually. I thought this was going to mess with it a lot more. And I think that's partially because letter pairs are kind of common. This one messes everyone up enough that I really hope Word has not destroyed all my images because it does this every year. But hopefully I have all of the images from last year, and on the lecture quiz I'll have a bunch of these for you to work through. Because it's kind of a waste of time for me to stand up here and try to explain all the rules to you. You really just need to kind of try to make this make sense. But this is a block cipher. This is something where if you mess up one letter, you're not going to be able to get the other one. It's kind of done as a unit. It's only using two letters, so it feels a bit like a string cipher. It's got some of the nice properties of one. But this is a block cipher. Okay. Checking my handout. We skipped the veneer. Okay. And I did not put it. All right. Stream ciphers versus block ciphers. So, kind of having gone over this, a stream cipher is the speed of transformation. So you can do this really, really fast. You have a low error rate. You don't have error propagation. So if I mess up one letter, only one letter's messed up. But there's low, what we call diffusion. That means that one letter doesn't impact its neighbor at all. You're not really kind of sending this data out sideways across the entire text. And I'll give examples next week of that. And you could totally mess the stream cipher. You can dump some letters in the middle. If you happen to know where the date is in the sequence, like how far in it is, you could, for example, switch a date around. It's really easy to kind of just drop some letters and just muck up the cipher. Block ciphers are awesome because they kind of diffuse the letters. So you can sort of see this in Playfair. Now, it's not just the case that if I mess up one letter, it will also mess up its neighbor. This is low diffusion. We'll see some higher diffusion ones later. But the idea here is that one letter is impacting the other one. So E does not always translate to the same thing. It now depends on what its neighbor letter is. And so this is what we call diffusion. It's kind of spreading some of this information out. This is much slower to encrypt and decrypt because now you can't just do it per letter. It does take more time. We usually need padding, and we kind of sometimes have to have messages of certain lengths because they have to match the block size. And you have this problem with error propagation. I make an error here, it will impact its neighbors. This is important with whatever your translation is. I just put this up here to make this very, very clear. In this class, we assume that the attacker knows how the crypto is done. We assume that the key is secret. Please keep your keys secret. But the crypto itself should be public. This is a philosophical opinion of the cryptography community. There have been what we call the crypto wars over this. It's very important that algorithms be public and keys be secret. And we want public algorithms so people can check them. And we'll see examples of kind of places where people have messed up. A really stupid sentence you might ever hear in a meeting is, "Oh, I'm inventing my own crypto for this. We need to stop this person now." Because unless they have actually gotten a PhD on this, they're probably wrong. So we always assume that the algorithms are public and the keys are secret. All right, in this bit, I thought this would take me longer. All right, I may have to go into next week's slides, or Friday's slides briefly. So we talked about substitution ciphers and permutation ciphers. And let's see. I am sorry for those taking notes. I did not expect us to get through this quickly. So let's see what's the beginning of next week's slides. Go back?
Go back.
Yep.
How does block cipher achieve information diffusion?
It requires its neighbor.
It does require.
There's several different ways of doing block ciphers. Well, actually, both ways of doing block ciphers. So ignore the veneer. Let's go back to the simple one. A transposition cipher. Even this is dependent upon its neighbor. Its position within the text impacts whether or not where it will land.
Yes.
And so if you mess up any of these, if you let a character go and not be present, it will change the output of the cipher. And it will similarly change the decryption. So if I'm sitting there with a telegram going beep, 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 and I mess something up, I'm not getting my original text back. The diffusion here is really pathetic. The diffusion here is better. In this one now, one letter is directly impacting another letter. All right, the beginning of next lecture is actually fairly simplistic, so I'm going to do that and then I will drop this. I realized last year that most of you live in this modern age and have never had to send something by telegram. So we're going to briefly talk about what a telegram looks like so that any of this makes sense. This is a telegraph See these wires up here? Look at all those bolts. That's for sending messages. You've probably seen these in videos. So the first telegraph was sent in 1844, and they finally got wires to Europe in 1866. You just sit there and you really go beep, 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 and a little thing that's down here. Fairly simple concept, right? Beep, beep. You can do long beeps, you can do short beeps, you can send them somewhere Morse code. There's a whole bunch of different ways to encode this stuff. But that is literally what they sent. This is an example of international Morse code. And there's no way to send a letter through telegraph. So Morse code is invented. So the idea is that now instead of an A, I'm using beep, beep. And then this is how information is being sent. This is an example. My grandfather once got a telegraph from Shirley Temple. If you look at all this information on here, what was actually sent over the wire, right? This is their address. This is the name of the person being sent to. So some of that must have been sent. Regret unable to accept your invitation, October due to prior commitment. Wow, that's terse. We said how much stuff. That's terse. And then this little code number at the bottom. You've got to shrink stuff. If you've got someone saying beep, 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 you shrink a lot of things and you say kind of this terse, weird language. I talk about English or E being the most common letter. It might not even be the most common letter. And you're assuming that we encrypt the thing that this is what was encrypted. It's probably not. Most telegraphs sent via something called a code book. So a code book is not really what you think. The idea is that you have this phrase here that requires a lot of letters, and then this weird set of letters that means that phrase. So a singular telegraph company would have books that are sent out to all the different telegraph operators, where there'd be a short key phrase that means this long sentence. So when someone walks into the telegraph office and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have to miss a meeting in some other place," they don't write, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have to miss a meeting." They write like Y7496. And then just that is sent across the telegraph wire because the telegraph wire is just so valuable. And I see people laughing, but it's shocking how much things you see from even Google, where they're doing things like taking a large code piece and shrinking it, because every letter they send is actually a lot of effort when you're the size of Google. And that's an example of this. So when they talk about codes and decrypting some of this stuff, we're kind of almost having to decrypt two levels. One of them is decrypting the message being sent back and forth, and the other one is decrypting this code book, which is known only to the company. Okay. So we use code books alongside encryption, and we use both of them because if we lose one, we don't necessarily lose the other. You'll see this thing in movies a lot with the military, where they're like, Operation Sandbox, and you're like, what the heck? And they're picking these stupid random names just to make sure the real names aren't used. So this is an example from also World War II. This is the U.S. Navy, and they're trying to figure out which place is being. Sorry. The U.S. Navy codebreakers decrypted that the Japan planned to attack AF. What the heck is AF? And Japan is not stupid, so they have not been using the letters actually associated with the real city. So what they did is they guessed the AF was Midway Base. And so they sent accidentally a message in the clear saying that Midway Base happened to be running out of extra water. And then they intercepted another communication that they were able to decrypt that says, "Oh, AF is running out of water." And then they figured out, AF is Midway Base, and then they were able to do a lot of putting that together in an organized military operation. Well, we use two levels of encryption. We encrypt the thing, and then sometimes we use these code book words so that even if the thing is decrypted, it can be managed. And my main point in kind of this little mini intro lecture is that you're not just building encryption. You're building encryption on top of other things. In most of today's lecture, we ignored spaces. Do you think your computers ignore spaces? What's the single most common letter actually in the English language? The space. When you're sending across a telegraph where every letter matters and you're sending it to a human and the human on the other side is like, oh, obviously that's the word break and there's the other word break and there's the other word break and then the human just puts it back together, you can totally ignore spaces. When you start doing this via computers, you can't pull this off anymore. Playfair just dropped all the J's. I mean, what would happen if we just dropped all the J's? A lot of things would break. So you have to think about kind of the realities when you're looking at encryption and decryption. And I'm going to end there because this slide's about to start moving into the actual main lecture for Friday. All right, thank you very much.
No, thank you.